Welcome to Nerdarchy, for nerds by nerds. I'm Nerdcast Dave, and today I am joined by Craig Campbell from NerdBurger Games. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. How's it going? It's been a little while. I was on here way back when Capers was happening on Kickstarter, and now I'm back.
Yeah, literally years ago. We took a break for these for a while, but now it's like everybody's home, depending where you live. So we're like, why not bring it back and chill with people in the afternoon? Give them, if we can alleviate at least an hour of boredom, hopefully.
Leave an hour for you, for me, and hopefully for a handful of other people. And in the States, of course, this is the day before Independence Day, so a lot of people have the day off.
Yeah, that's true too. Which seems really weird nowadays, anyway, right? The concept of working in days off because a lot of us are working from home.
Yeah, it all bleeds together for a lot of folks. Sure.
I just saw someone had just posted something. It might even be one of the groups that I'm in. And they're like, "Oh, I have today off because of the holiday." I'm like, "You get a day off?"
What's that? I was working from home for a few weeks, for maybe a month or so a while back. But I'm back in the office. Luckily, my office, everything's kind of spread out, so and it's a small office to begin with. So yeah, everything's okay. I'm doing what I can to make sure that I'm not getting sick and not getting other people sick. So mostly, I'm just staying home and designing games.
So, for anyone that's not familiar with NerdBurger Games, you want to give us the elevator pitch?
For the company?
Yeah, for what you do.
I do this in my free time, so it's just kind of like there's the schedule of releases is kind of like when I get it done. But I design tabletop role-playing games. The games tend to be kind of niche games that explore areas of the RPG landscape that aren't really hit on by other folks or aren't kind of hit on very often. I tend to get into things that are kind of I don't, for example, have like a big science fiction game, and I don't have a big classic fantasy game. I do things like Murders and Acquisitions, where you're fighting your way up the corporate ladder by whatever means necessary, and Capers, which is all about super powered gangsters in the roaring 20s, and Die Laughing, which is you're a character in a horror movie and you're going to die, and it's a horror comedy, so make it funny. So yeah, kind of weird niche little things that I wish were games that I wish existed, so I decided to make them.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, our home group for a while had been talking about doing a 20s superheroes game. So, but we weren't going to make one. We were just going to play one of the existing systems and use that as the backdrop. So you're not alone. There definitely are other people that have thought that would be cool.
Yeah, well, Capers did fairly well. I was like a little surprised actually that it did as well as it did with Kickstarter, and it's had some longevity. I've done some supplements for it because, I initially planned the game to be like, okay, here's a core book. Everything you need is in there. There's some support material like adventures and things, but otherwise it's going to be just this thing and that's it. And like halfway through the campaign, people hadn't even seen the final product, and they were like, "Are you going to do supplements? Is there going to be more?"
Yeah.
So I thought, well, maybe. And so I gave it a shot, and I did 3 supplements. The third of which is like literally the proof. What I hope to be the final proof copy is in the mail on its way to me right now.
So you can't go wrong with running booze, Tommy guns, and superpowers.
Yeah, I-beams and Tommy guns. All yeah.
Yeah. What is the third supplement?
The third supplement is Capers Offworld, which the other 2 supplements kind of take the 20s of Capers forward into the 40s, and in the 40s it makes it into kind of a noir game, and then the 60s turns it into like super spy and super villain with superpowers games. So it's all cops and robbers with superpowers basically. Yeah. And then Capers Offworld goes back to the 20s, but then layers on like what if there was space travel. But like Buck Rogers / Flash Gordon style retro future pulpy kind of cheesy space travel. So there's like the Aether Chamber, which is what you use to power your spaceship, and You've got laser cannons and power augmenters that you can shoot your powers through the cannon and shoot a spaceship with your powers, and alien species and space cops and rocket robbers and all that kind of thing. And then there's a little piece in there too that talks about time travel, and the idea being that then you could connect all of the time periods together. So if you want to have your characters jump around through the 20s, 40s, and 60s, there's guidelines for that.
There's guidelines. Cool.
And you can play alien species and all that fun stuff, monsters.
So are you working on anything, now that you've got, we were talking a lot of free time on your time or your hands?
Yeah, I'm looking at right now it's in playtesting. I've been working on it for a year-ish, but it's been in hard playtesting since the beginning of this year. And it's moving along quickly because of how the world is, and I can devote a lot more time to it. A game called Good Strong Hands, which is a fantasy game about fantastical beings and their human allies who are working to save their fantastical world from a faceless, malevolent entity known as the Void. So it's shades of kind of 80s nostalgia, lighthearted fantasy movies like Neverending Story, Legend, Willow, Dark Crystal, Labyrinth, those sorts of stories, but with a little bit of there's a little dark twist to the game as well.
So the title is a direct lift from the Neverending Story.
Like I was debating about what to call it, and I had a lot of different ideas, and I was at a convention last year. Imagine that. I was at a convention with a friend, and I suggested the idea of Good Strong Hands, which I wasn't sure about because I thought, well, that's going to make everybody think, well, this is a Never-Ending Story game, and it's not strictly that. But he said, it's such a good name. And the more I thought about it, the more it kind of stuck with me that, it is a good name. And it builds on the idea within the game that it's, how are you going to defeat the Void and save your world? Well, with your good, strong hands. And that is to say, everybody. It's like, the characters working together to do the good thing and fight the good fight to rescue their world from destruction.
I've been on a tear with making my kids watch some of the movies that I grew up with, and it's not going great. they're not impressed with.
They're not impressed by the special effects of Rockbiter, who is clearly a man in a rubber suit, or maybe a big puppet. I'm not sure about Rockbiter.
Well, we haven't got to that.
Was he a big puppet? I think he might have been a big puppet. It was a. But anyway, Rockbiter from the Neverending Story is the character who talks about his good, strong hands and how.
Yeah, well, one of the things is because we just recently made them watch Willow and Legend, and Time Bandits, and they're like, my son's like, what's with all these old movies and little people?
Yeah. Well, it's surprising. How old is your son?
19.
Okay, has he seen Lord of the Rings? Because there was a lot of little people. I mean, they were digitally shrunk little people, but there were a lot of small folk in that movie.
Well, it's so weird because he calls everything graphics or CGI, and like practical effects mean nothing to his generation apparently.
Oh
yeah. So he was not he was the only one that got a slight pass was Legend. All the other ones he was not feeling at all. And I must say, going back and watching them, like the pacing in those movies is so different than the movies of today.
Oh yeah. They can be slower at times. When I rewatched Legend as part of working on this, I was surprised at actually how quickly it moves. I remembered it being very slow, but I felt rewatching it, I was like, you meet the characters and then Jack and is Lily, right?
Yeah.
Encounter the unicorn, and the unicorn horn and the goblins show up, and then everything Jack is off to the races, chasing down the goblins to get the unicorn horn back, and you're jumping back and forth with Darkness, being evil Tim Curry in the giant devil suit.
Yeah.
It moves along pretty quickly. The thing that bothered me about Legend was Jack. What was Jack like? Lily very slowly walks across the stream and walks up to the unicorn very, very slowly. It's this beautiful, like, and she's in the flowing gown, and there's leaves, and it's beautiful, and it's supposed to be contrasted against what's about to happen when the unicorn horn is stolen and the unicorn starts dying. Jack watches this happen. She approaches, she's going for the unicorn, and then after everything goes to hell, he chastises her for touching the thing. I'm like, Jack, you watched her slowly walk up there. And, I felt like, Jack, come on, really? I mean,
you definitely have plenty of time to knock an arrow and take her out.
And if Jack was letting that happen so that darkness could be confronted in some way, and if there was a greater threat and greater reason for, like, well, we got to get rid of darkness, right? Because this battle is coming, we might as well fight it. Then okay, but why did he have to get all up in her face about it?
I don't know, man. It was the 80s. It was strange times.
Yeah, but it's okay. It's got great characters in there. Gump and what was the pixie's name?
I don't know. And I just watched it not that long ago. I'm terrible remembering in general.
Yeah, I can't think of her name right off the top of my head, but I love the character of Gump, who's like the boy, like the elfin boy.
Yeah.
With no shirt on, and he's got the bow, and he kind of speaks. He's got a unique way of speaking. Anyway, yeah. So that movie and movies like that you can sort of replicate with good, strong hands. Although there's some like dark twist, like the void can corrupt you, and you have to decide whether you're going to let that happen or you're going to resist it. And
what is the core mechanics in this game going to be? I know you use cards and capers.
This one is all D6s. The mechanics are straightforward. There's 4 traits. Body, mind, charm, and heart, and you make everything, all your checks you make using that, and you'll be rolling 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 dice, shooting for a target number, trying to equal that target number or more. If you fail to hit it, then there's a complication. If you get the target number exactly, you earn with 1 die. If 1 die is successful, you earn a currency in the game called spirit. If more than one die are successful, you get like a boon. You have a better success, but you also earn a point of shadow. And as you accumulate shadow, if you get too much shadow, then you gain a corruption, which is like a dark power. So the idea being that when you do really well and you show yourself to be a hero and be really capable, that's when the void notices you. And so the void plants this little seed of shadow inside of you and tries to tempt you toward gaining one of these powers. And so you can try to resist gaining that shadow, or you can walk the line, because those corruption powers will help you defeat the void. But if you gain too many of them, you fall.
I have way too many friends that would be trying to accumulate all the void.
Yeah, and people will want to do that, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. It's been an interesting playtest process, because I've had a few people that were like, so wait, I get punished if I roll really well? And I said, well, you get rewarded and punished. You get rewarded with it being a really excellent success, but you also, this corruption thing can start happening to you. So it'll be I think it's one of those games that it'll be interesting to see the tactics that people use when they advance their characters, because if you raise your traits too high too quickly, you start to roll more dice, which means you get multiple successes more times, which means you potentially go down the path of corruption faster. You could be spending your advancement on talents, which are like neat little abilities that break the rules. So I think you'll like you said, you'll have players that'll be like, okay, it's all going into my traits so that I can have my traits as high as possible, so I can be constantly gaining shadow, and I want those corruptions badly. As long as you can stave off the inevitable.
So is the premise of the game is like ultimately you're fighting the void?
The idea is that you never can truly fight the void itself. The void it's the force of entropy. The idea is that in this world, there is every so often the void tries to, bring an end to it, because everything has a beginning, everything has an end. So the void is going to, the entropy itself is essentially going to try to destroy the world. Will the world live on? It's a question of whether or not the heroes can save that world so that it will live on. But eventually, someday, again, somewhere down the road, somebody else is going to have to. deal with the void again. But you can end up against just kind of the forces of the void in the form of things that are called void scions, which are like manifestations of the void, just like dark evil. They're like, like undead and stuff like that. And then there's also there are folk in the world that might have allied themselves with the void for one reason or another, for they've been bribed with power or to help their, the void may have threatened their loved ones or whatever it is that ropes them down that path. So you can end up dealing with them, and if you can do it correctly, if you do well, maybe you can bring them back from the darkness and stymie the void's plans in that way.
So it's a fantasy game, definitely leaning more into the fantastical, but not like it doesn't sound like in the high magic sense, because like I don't know how to properly describe like the movies that you're drawing reference from, because they're kind of some of them are kind of like more whimsical,
This is intended to be whimsical. In fact, I'm figuring out a way to use the word whimsical as part of the subtitle. Like the way I'm describing it right now, the subtitle for the game is like a darkly whimsical game of saving your fantastic world, or something like that. So yeah, it's the idea is kind of a combination of like it's whimsical and kind of light, but also there's this kind of nastiness in this darkness that you have to deal with as you go. And so it doesn't have there are no dwarves, no elves, no gnomes, no halflings. It's all like some of the folk that you can play are things that I've created, and they're in some cases kind of inspired by those movies. Like there are wildkin in the game, which is basically variation of Sir Didymus for Labyrinth. So like the little fox guy, the anthropomorphized fox. So there's those types of things, and then there's other things pulled from mythology. And so I tried to pick things that don't have a lot of baggage built into them, so that people won't want to automatically play them a certain way. Like how do you play a fawn? Well, you don't play a fawn in like a goat person in many games. So I used fawns because they don't have a lot of preconceptions built into them. So you can just you can take that fawn character and kind of take it in a direction that's unique for the world that you're building.
But more importantly, will there be racing snails?
I don't specifically have them written up, but I think maybe racing snails could make their way into one of the story outlines, rather than developing a big setting section. Like there's no 40-page setting write up. The idea is that the players and the GM kind of create the world as they go. So like when you're playing a particular type of folk, you might be playing like, say, a brownie. Well, what's brownie society like? I don't know. What do you think it's like? In your game, in the world that you're creating, what is brownie society like? You'll develop that as needed. But then I'm generating a series of 2-page story outlines, like a mini. They're intended to be like a full adventure, but it's not like the adventure isn't spelled out in exacting detail. It's like here's the background, here's the basic plot of what's going on. Here are some important points. Here are some NPCs. Here are some locations. Here's a couple of major challenges to overcome. And so the GM can kind of weave the pieces that they like from that into a story to kind of tell the story of characters at a crossroads who are falling asleep and having horrible nightmares, or characters that are have fallen in league with the void and are building a machine that is generating a gigantic storm that's going to rage across the planet or across the land. So like that's how the setting is being presented, as like these little snippets.
So I was just laughing at the chat a little bit, but so basically plot outlines. Are you going to do a section in the book that discusses creating the campaign or the game that you're playing in with your players? Because there's definitely some games that do that, and it's a part of the game.
The GM section gets into creating a campaign, creating stories, and different types of encounters. and talks. It provides advice into kind of general advice, but then kind of some of it honed toward like what this game is kind of about. And a lot of it has to do with the cooperation between the players and the GM creating it. So like a lot of there's GM section information that's stuff that's talks about asking leading questions. Like if you want, I haven't filled in all this. I don't spend 3 hours prepping this adventure. I read this 2-page outline. We're going to go from that. But I've got some leading questions that I'll ask the players, X, Y, or Z, about the world or about the location that they're at, and the players will help to fill that in. How to handle the void and its presence in the world, because you don't ever really fight it on its own, but it's always sort of there. So you can, there's advice on speaking in the void's voice. Like once people start to gain shadow, the void starts to whisper to them and tries to tempt them. There's some information about like what happens if you have a character that dies or falls to the void. How do you deal with that in game? If a character falls to the void, can you bring them back? Can you have a story that's a quest by the other characters to save them? And those sorts of things. It's a lot of advice that helps you to put everything together, but it doesn't, like, there's no like adventure path, so to speak, that guides you from beginning to end. So
you're moving in another direction now. So does that mean you're done with Capers, or or it just depends on what you feel inspired to do?
The thing with Capers was I initially planned to just do the core book, and then I said, okay, well, I'll do these supplements, and I had some ideas, and I'm just about done with that. Will I return to Capers? I've got a big chunk of Capers Cyber that's written that jumps the story forward to the 2000s and becomes a cyberpunk game. So cyber, near future cyberpunk with superpowers.
Yeah.
But that's going to, because it's so far divested from the original Capers game set in the 1920s, it really needs to be its own full fat book of the whole game. So there's a lot more work to be done there. Rule system wise, there's not as much to do because that's all developed and play tested now for years. But there's a lot of world to write and to make that just right. So I expect Capers Cyber or Cyber Capers or whatever I end up calling it to happen at some point. But that's down the road a little ways. I couldn't see that being ready for people for play testing maybe inside of a year.
Okay, cool.
But I'm plinking away at it. Cyberpunk is there's a lot going on in a lot of cyberpunk kind of settings. So I've got a lot of ideas, and I've got to weed some stuff out, and I've got to find ways to tie things together and kind of make it into an interesting setting where my hope is to have the punk actually be there. And it's not just about running around doing missions in that world, but the characters will actually be fighting the corporations and trying to help society and wrestle society away from the mega corporations that have come to dominate.
So obviously you're gonna need some hacking and some figure out cyberspace or whatever you're calling the virtual world.
Well, the great thing about the virtual world is I've already written that game. It's called Capers. So the cyberspace, the most popular cyberspace world in the game is going to be the 1920s.
Oh, nice.
So you'll be able to just take your character to cyberspace or whatever I end up calling it, and you'll be in, Roaring 20s New York, and you can run into Lucky Luciano and Meyer Lansky and Arnold Rothstein, and they will be, AIs that that are statted up in the Capers game. Like I can use that, like that whole book becomes the virtual world, or at least one of them.
You'll have to corporatize the 1920s though.
Well, and I think that'd be like different cities might be controlled by different corporations and different factions, and there might be like somebody that actually has like New York is like it's the hacker, it's the crowdsourced The virtual world is, one of the cities is, and I like the idea of like you can seeking out speakeasies because you project yourself into the virtual world. You go to a speakeasy and now you're completely private. Like there's something built into the technology of this place that you can't be spied on there. So when you're planning to have a meeting with your conspirators to wrestle, things away from the megacorps or to hurt them in some way, in a futuristic society, you're always worried about surveillance. Whereas going into the speakeasy within the virtual world and tying that into capers, like, okay, that's where you go to have your meeting. That's where you're private.
Nice. So you also, you do a bunch of stuff. I'm kind of amazed at all the stuff that you do and have a full-time job as well. So you had the NerdBurger Con coming up, but you also do a weekly podcast as well, and you've been doing it for, you said like 7 years or something now.
Yeah. We're at 7 years, new episode every single Wednesday. We haven't missed a single day in 7 years, over 7 years. And my podcast partner and I, Mike, joke that it's now a point of pride between the two of us that neither one of us wants to be the guy that screws that up. Like, neither one of us wants to be the one who quits. Neither one of us wants to be the one who has something come up or whatever causes us to miss a week, because the other one won't let them live it down.
So in like 40, 50 years from now, when one of you has kicked the bucket, the other one can gloat.
Oh, yeah. Well, if all goes well, we'll enter this. We'll hit the singularity. Uh-huh. When I die before Mike, he'll have a virtual Craig that's downloaded into a computer, and he can continue doing the podcast until he dies, and then virtual Craig and virtual Mike can do the podcast into infinity
and beyond. Nice. So tell me about the NerdBurger Con that's coming up.
Well, because the gaming world has no physical conventions because of the pandemic, I find myself with like, okay, suddenly I have weekends that I'm not going to be doing stuff, so I have more time available. I'm not planning for conventions and trying to get things together, which has helped with like me having even more time toward game stuff. And so I thought, well, I know that people want to play the games. They're looking for outlets and ways to do that. So what if I just organize like a Saturday game day for the fans on my Discord and maybe invite a handful of other people that I know, other friends outside the Discord, people that a few game designers that I know that I'm closer friends with, and we'll just do some stuff. And I said, well, why only make it Saturday? Like let's make it the weekend, Friday evening, Saturday, Sunday, and do like a actual virtual convention of just game events, some panels, invite some streamer friends of mine to do stream stuff. We'll do some giveaways. We'll raise some funds for some charities and things. We'll have chat room, like voice chat rooms and text chat rooms for people just to hang out and talk gaming and game design and whatnot, and just see what we can turn it into and how many people we can get to show up and hopefully not get overwhelmed in the process. So far, I have not been overwhelmed, but you never know. So yeah, that's coming up August 14, 15, 16. That Friday, it's just that evening. And then Saturday, most of the day, and Sunday, most of the day. If you go to nerdburgergames.com, there's a NerdBurger Con page there, which has the basic info and a whole list of streamers and designers that are already invited. They're all going to be running games and doing panels. And I'm rounding up a few more people to add to that. And then over the course of the next week or so, I'm going to be cracking the whip on everybody to submit their events. And here's the train, everybody.
Yep, it's that time. Is it running on time? That's the real question.
Oh, they come constantly. It's a busy track.
Yeah, I used to live not far from a train as well, and that became a daily part of your life. And also, like if you were going to drive certain ways, you'd have to try and anticipate the train, because if you got stuck where the train was, the train would just go by forever.
Yeah.
And
in the world we live in, we want everything faster. So like getting stopped for a train just takes forever, even though it's a minute
Depends on the train. Like
2 minutes. Like it feels like it takes so long.
But I think my wife was stuck the one day, and it's her personality, so she counted the cars, and it was over 100.
Oh,
So
that'll do it.
yeah, sometimes it is just a minute, but sometimes it really is forever. She might still be there counting train cars. I don't know. In an alternate timeline. So, is there any other areas or genres you want to explore after fantasy?
Oh boy, I've got a few ideas for things. Kickstarter has done the Zine Quest thing. Are you familiar with that?
I am not.
Every February, the last 2 years, Kickstarter has been like doing this promotional thing for RPGs, for games, for Zine Quest they call it, which is like zine style, like old school, like, you know, half page folded over, stapled together, handmade, you know, kind of look and feel zines. And people do like these little games that are just in these little booklets. And it's always, you know, there's like really weird little conceptual things and just kind of goofy little games. And so I have an idea that I'm tinkering with that, tentatively called Preposterous Monstrous, which is basically, think of all of your like sci-fi or straight to streaming weird monster movies, you know, your wolf shark and ghost, you know, swamp squid. And so the idea being that you know, you're playing characters that are fighting against one of those preposterous monsters, that you'd actually create by like combining two things. There'd be like I said, like swamp squid, or there'd be you know, fire breathing shark, or, you know, you'd have a descriptor and a noun of an animal type. And so every time you play it, you can just have like a different variation, and then all the characters would be like kind of classic archetypes of character types that you see in monster movies, and have it be have the mechanics be like, you know, fairly simple, but allow you to really go over the top and big. And it's just like about describing like, you know, these ridiculous ways to fight these ludicrous monsters in very cinematic style.
Yeah, it sounds like the monsters there needs to be a random table for those. Or several tables.
I'm toying with the idea of doing, because it'll be a zine product that'll be stapled.
Yeah.
Just 8.5 by 11 pages, you know, folded over, stapled, where I would put the monster information on the middle two pages, and you could open the book up, you bend the staples up, remove the two middle pages, bend the staples back down, and then that's your rule book. And then those two pages you cut up into cards, and so you can literally have like, you know, random, just draw two cards, like, you know, you get the descriptor and the animal and put them together, and that's what you.
Okay.
You know, that's what your story's about.
So you can square off against the atomic shark.
Yeah, atomic. Ooh, atomic. That's good. I should put that one down. Do I have atomic on there? I might not. I'll have to check.
It feels like, you know, something from that time period.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Atomic armadillos.
It has eye beams and it glows and.
Yeah, you know, and hey, if you can capture them, you can use them as lanterns.
Yeah, so yeah, just tinkering with that idea. I've got an idea for a game that kind of replicates Stephen King stories. Kind of, you know, the small town, you know, weird small town stuff going on. Like, have that, you know, and actually like create a city. I'm surprised. It's weird. I'm surprised that Stephen King. There's no Stephen King RPG. Like, why isn't there, you know, an RPG about weird stuff happening in a main town? So I thought, well, you know, I can rub the serial numbers off and basically, you know, kind of do those stories of like small town horror with weird occurrences where you live in this town where all the weird stuff happens, but for some reason nobody ever moves. You know, everybody hangs around.
Yeah, there's a couple games that kind of do it, but from the kids' point of view, so it's more.
Yeah.
You know, more not Stephen King, but more like Goonies and Stand By Me and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think you're right there. You might be on to something. Jen says centerfold monsters. So yeah, Craig, you dirty man.
Big shark, all
yeah.
Big tail. Look the size of my tail.
Elf Bait wants to know if a Stephen King RPG mandates a 47-page backstories.
Oh yes, in a Stephen King RPG, the first third of the book will be a long discussion of how the characters, like what their early lives are like, that got them to the point where the weird stuff started happening. So we need to learn everything we can possibly learn about the characters before we actually get to.
Then we can play.
And then at the end there will be a table that is just 100 unsatisfying endings.
Ouch.
Well, I shouldn't say that. That's for the movie version of the Stephen King, right? Like a lot of his endings, the endings to his stories actually tend to work fine in print.
Yeah.
There are a good number of those stories that they don't translate well to movies because he has a tendency. He likes to do endings that are very like cerebral, like the battle is being fought in someone's mind. There's a number of stories that do that, and the movie versions, the endings just fall apart because they can't represent that very well.
So Jen says you're gonna need a prequel game to play the actual game.
Sure. And then if you play it multiple times, with different characters, you have to constantly self-reference back to the previous versions. Like you can never have a story that just stands alone on itself. It all needs to be tied together at some pivotal point that you might call the black silo, or the dark tower.
So that was a really long way of saying you think you want to do a horror game too.
Well, and I've done a horror game, but I think I want to do. Yeah, I think there's a small town horror. That's it's the horror element is there. It's part of the story, but a lot of it is about the characters living in a small town. And I grew up in a small town, so I can draw from that.
Nice. So, do you have any like unexpected stories that's kind of surprised you as a creator of Capers? Since that's kind of like that's your longest running with the most where you're most vested. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's the flagship game, I guess. Interesting stories regarding Capers. Well, I ran a campaign that I streamed for practically nobody because I don't stream enough, so like there's no audience. But I did record them all, and they're all on YouTube. If you go to there's a NerdBurger Games YouTube page, they're all there. There's like 25 episodes, 2 hours each. There's some stuff that happens in there that I don't want to spoil any of it, but I'll say the players came up with some things I wasn't expecting. We took some turns with some alternate worlds. Because comic books love to do the alternate Earth kind of thing, where like everything's the same but a little different. Where and so I'll entice people with that. I took the characters to an alternate world, and I made a couple of jaws drop with a revelation or two about that world and how they related to it, and I don't know if that's a very good answer to your question.
I was thinking more along the lines of like people using the game in ways you didn't anticipate.
I can't think of anything right off the top of my head. With Die Laughing, I was informed a while back. I had somebody reach out to me via Twitter or Discord. I don't remember for sure which one, but they informed me that, and I was just surprised. I think of Die Laughing as being like it's a light game. You can buy it for just a few bucks. It's good for one shots. But there was this group that I think they were in Michigan, a group of friends who it's become their ritual. They play Die Laughing every single Friday. That's just like they get together and they play a 2-hour game of Die Laughing, and then they do other stuff. That's just what they do all the time, to the point that they've actually started to create their own custom monsters. They've used the monsters that are provided in the book, and they started creating their own. So they took photoshopped out with Adobe or whatever, took a monster page out there, manipulated the text, edited and everything, and sent me, one of the monsters that they created.
Oh, nice.
and said, "Hey, this is the thing we made," because I was like, "And you're playing every week?" And she's like, the young lady I was in touch with said, "Yeah, we just like it's our thing now," which is incredibly flattering.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, when people take your stuff and kind of run with it like that, and make it their own is super cool.
Yeah, I've seen a few pieces of art of like fan art, and had a custom monster done. Capers is built with like the playing card system is released under Creative Commons. It's an open license. You can use it to make a game if you want to. We just ask that I just ask that you credit the game that it came from. And I know a couple of people who are toying around with things for that. They haven't quite gotten to the point of finishing what they're working on, but I'm really looking forward to that. Like somebody's going to take my system and make a new game out of it. That'll be kind of cool.
It is kind of cool to see what directions you kind of inspired, and then in turn maybe that'll inspire you as well.
Will make me go back and make more capers or more games using that system.
You'll never get out. You'll be trapped in the capers.
I think it's a pretty cool little system. I think is it truly universal? No, I don't think there are many truly universal systems. There are things that it does well, and I think there are genres of games that you could make that utilize that do that type of thing that you could utilize that system for. I think there are certainly things you could do with it. And there's a lot of unexplored territory because like the game doesn't deal with magic. Like how would you do magic in the game? You could do it kind of like how powers are handled, but you could also, there's a lot of interesting things you can do with card flipping.
So is it fair to say you're more of a fan of specific games rather than generic
systems?
Yeah.
I think there's generic systems are fine. There are uses for them. Usually the issue I have with generic systems is that sometimes they are turned into a game where the system really doesn't support that particular genre terribly well. But somebody does it because they know the system and they love the system and they want to work in it. And there's, I can't fault them for the passion and loving the game system. But like, if you look at any of the open license systems, and Capers is certainly one of those, that they have certain things that they do very well. And that means that you can create a lot of games out of them. But I do love me a game that has a custom system that is crafted specifically to do what that game is about. That's always really kind of neat to see how somebody generates mechanics that cause you to feel a certain way or cause the game to function a certain way, cause your character to suffer certain types of consequences that are very specific to what that game is.
Our website manager is anytime he's presented with a new game, he always wants to know, what is this game supposed to do, and do the rules clearly spell that out?
Yeah, and there are games where the description gets very literal, and they'll say literally this rules, the rules are blah 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 blah, and it's trying to do, you figure it out very quickly that the game is trying to do X, Y, and Z, and then the rules support that. And then there are games that are just written more subtly, but I think it's not all of my games necessarily do that that well. I don't think Murders and Acquisitions does it really well at all, other than the fact that the character sheet is a resume.
Yeah.
So it's kind of thematically, it uses buzzwords and catchphrases. But Capers was designed to do that. Die Laughing is designed to be the mechanics for that game is just a countdown to your character's death. The mechanics do two things, and one of them is count down your character to their death. So I'd like to see more of those games. There's a thoughtfulness that goes into them that it's always interesting. It's a peek inside of somebody's head, to see
hence you're making them.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know if I succeed as well as, there's a lot of games out there that I think probably do it better than the stuff that I do, but I try.
I actually don't even think that's all that important. Like, you're doing the thing that you want to do, which is awesome. Like, I've had people come to me and be like, "Hey, I'm making this game," and then I'll ask them like, a specific question, and they're like, why they're doing something a particular way. And they're like, "Oh, I don't know. I just felt like I just wanted to do it to be different." Which is the reason why like we haven't really done any games, is because I don't like, unless you have a purpose or a reason to do something. To me, I'm just like, why are you doing it? But like, it's cool when I see someone like you who's like, well, here's a specific niche that I wanted to fill. Here's a specific thing I wanted to do, and then you're doing it. Like that, to me, like that's the best reason to do anything.
Yeah, and I think it's not that you don't have something that fills that fits that kind of idea. It's just that you haven't maybe discovered that thing yet. There may come a point where you'd be like, "Oh, we need this game, and it doesn't exist, and this is how I could do it," and you're off to the races.
Anytime someone comes up with something because they're trying to solve a problem, even if it's only a problem they have, right? Like, to me, that's like that's the reason to do a thing.
Well, Die Laughing, it does a number of things, but like the initial inception of Die Laughing, where it started like 10 years ago, geez, that game just like in my head, and I did try creating it a few different times. It went on the idea, it tried to solve a problem that I've seen in horror games, which is, what do you do when your character dies? And the answer to that is usually make another character. And I thought, well, is there any other way? Is there anything else you could do? Could you have your character death be like, okay, my character's dead and gone, and that's it. Like, the experience of playing a character in this game is over because my character is dead. What can I do to stay involved in the game? So I toyed around with a bunch of different ideas, and it eventually turned into Die Laughing, where when your character dies, you become a producer on the horror movie, and so you continue to manipulate the story, and you're still involved, but your character's gone. Or, turned into a sexy vampire or something.
Yeah. So how does that work? I mean, we probably talked about this years ago, but my memory does not stretch back that far. After the character dies, how do they stay involved as the producer on the movie?
Well, the Die Laughing is built in such a way that you're usually not going to kill the first character too quickly. So everybody gets a chance to play their character for a little while. But it is inevitable that a character is going to die. And then when you become a producer, well, what happens is there's a few different things. One, you gain a pool of producer points that allows you to, and you can spend those points on specific things that only producers can do. So you get a new subset of rules that's just for you. And then also in the game is GM-less. So the director, the position of director of the movie rotates around the table, and so even when your character is gone, you can still be the director. So like there'll come a point where you'll do the director thing, which is kind of to help set up the scene, play NPCs, do other things. So you're still involved in that too, and then you also have the producer stuff. So there's still quite a bit for you to do, and it's a game that's built around engaging as many players at the table as possible, killing the characters off relatively quickly. The game plays fairly short. You play a game in about 2 hours. So even if your character gets killed off really quickly, it's not like you're sitting there for 4 hours without a character.
Which is nice. Like I've heard of people trying to come up with like fast RPGs, and this seems like a pretty elegant way of doing it. And it has a finale and ending. Each session apparently, because you're all dead.
Except maybe one. Sometimes one person survives. Sometimes everybody dies. It kind of depends on the monster. There are certain monsters that are better at killing off everybody.
Yeah. What's your favorite monster?
Oh, good Lord. Well, I'm gonna say one of them anyway is the bloodthirsty bunnies, which is basically the monsters are a bunch of killer bunnies. They are a combination of the Vorpal bunny from Meaning of Life, or Holy Grail, Monty Python and the Holy Grail. So they're super deadly bunnies, when they kill somebody, they also cause that person to spawn a deadly bunny out of their chest, so they're alien. And because of that, they're also Knight of the Lepus. They're like the ridiculous. It's a rabbit. It's not a giant rabbit. It's not a weird alien rabbit. It's just a bunny. It's this big. So it's like all those things combined into one, and then the fact that it spawns that bunny, that another evil bunny when it kills somebody is one of the things that allows it to potentially kill everybody. So if it gets down to 2 players, and the bunnies attack, and one of the characters gets killed, that character spawns a deadly bunny which immediately attacks. And so if the one remaining character doesn't have a lot of dice left, that character can get killed. So it can kill everybody.
Have you ever played the tabletop game Killer Bunnies?
I'm familiar with it. I've not. I mean, I've heard of it. I've never played it. Is it what?
So the premise is:
are you playing the bunnies?
Yes, you play the bunnies. It's a card game, and you're trying to get out your bunnies so that you have to feed and water your bunnies.
Oh, very important.
And collect carrots. But at the same time, you're also trying to murder everyone else's bunnies.
So it's bunny on bunny. It's BBB.
Yes, yeah. Very, very much so. So you might have to get a game or two of that in, so you can add to your bunny repertoire. But yeah, it's like bunnies, but with swords, chainsaws, guns, and death rays, nukes, whatever it takes. So yeah, that's a lot of fun. So what is the most gruesome death from Die Laughing?
Oh boy, we had there was a bunny game where somebody, when the bunny exploded out of them, the player got to describe it and everything too, and they had like the whole character really blow up. Like they had a really great gruesome description of like an actual exploding character. There was one game where one of the monsters is basically like it's what are they called? Something Robots from Mars. It's not crazy. It's like Killer Robots from Mars. And it's a play on Transformers, but they're all like household appliances and things. So it's like the washing machine transforms into a robot and tries to kill you. And there was a game where the group ended up in an abandoned psychiatric hospital, abandoned hospital, and there was an iron lung machine, like that had been abandoned there long ago. The old iron lung that they put the person inside of, to breathe. And there came a point where like it's in Killer Robots from Mars, they like any household appliance or mechanical device can transform. So they had the iron lung come out and start walking around and murdering people, and they were doing the that, if you've ever seen like the sound effects of like those old iron lung things. And then I think, if I remember correctly, there was a character that ended up inside of it at one point too. Like it got, like that's how it died, and it ended up carrying the corpse of the person around inside of the iron lung after they got killed. The Killer Robots from Mars has a great twist where the first character, when your character, the rules don't specifically say your character dies. It says your character is wrapped, as in that's a wrap for your character. So because you might get transformed into a monster yourself, or something else might happen. And with Killer Robots from Mars, the first character to get wrapped is revealed to be the mad scientist who invented or who helped the Killer Robots from Mars. So you continue to play your character as like this.
Oh, nice.
So your character gets to keep showing up and taunting the players, as in addition to you being a producer and all that other fun stuff. So there's that's fun too.
It gives me a little bit of a Betrayer, House on the Hill kind of vibe.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a rip off of that. There's a couple of different monsters where when your character is wrapped, your character actually isn't killed. They actually reveal themselves to be something else.
Yeah, I wouldn't say rip off. It's more like sampling.
Yeah, it's an homage.
Yeah. So there are no new ideas anyway. All we can do is like reinvent the old ones and put our spin on it.
Oh no, I mean, we're constantly just playing with variations on a theme. Every once in a great while, somebody comes up with something completely new, like Dread.
Yeah.
And then there's 20 games that use the Jenga tower in all sorts of really interesting different ways, but it's still the Jenga tower. But Dread was like, groundbreaking in that respect.
Yeah. So is there any mechanics out there that you would like to incorporate or use that you just haven't found the right opportunity yet, like a Dread Tower?
Not specifically. I've kind of done my playing card thing, so I'm happy with that. I think that I like when I do these smaller games that are like the smaller books.
Mm-hmm.
I like doing just like for whatever reason, I've kind of got it in my head to do just D6s. Just multiple D6s, because I think one of the things that is nice about that is it makes it potentially a little more welcoming to people who aren't big into gaming or who are brand new. You're not throwing a lot of weird dice at them. You're just saying, oh, here, just pull the dice out of the Yahtzee game, and here's a real, here's some very straightforward rules, and you can play a game.
Oh, nice! You're trying to subtly trick them into RPGs with these familiar dice.
That's just ripped out. That's just ripped off from cheap ass games when they started doing games where they didn't include dice with anything. They didn't include tokens or dice or play money or any of that kind of stuff, because you've got all that stuff in your board games.
Yeah.
I don't need to package that. I don't need to package 6-sided dice into here and make you pay for that. I'll just give you the rules and the cards and the map.
Just create a game called Pillage, because you have to pillage your board game collection in order to play this game.
Yeah, I got to go to the junk drawer, get a box of toothpicks.
Yeah. Hey, whatever it takes. That I wasn't aware that was a concept, but that is kind of funny.
Cheap ass games, yeah. I mean, they've morphed in a variety of ways, and they've done some like really fancy versions of games. But the very initial inception was like the games were literally sold in a white 5x8 envelope. And the only thing that was in there was the rules, and then any unique cards, or they would use tiles. You'd build whatever map or board you needed was just built out of like 5x7 tiles. And then like everything else, if you needed play money, you went to the Monopoly set. If you needed dice, you got them out of Yahtzee.
It works, hey? It's there. Why not?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're slowly but surely trying to get some of our Muggle family into more, more indie games, slowly but surely. I mean, I eventually converted my wife into RPGs. It only took like 23 years or something.
I think there's a lot of people. I've heard some great stories from people talking about how they got a family member into a game, into playing a game. Like a few years ago, I was at a table, at my little booth table, and I barely had anything. I had Murders and Acquisitions and like the Capers preview game booklet. But I had some of these like little 1-page games that I made that were just like design exercises. I just printed them out on 8.5 by 11, and I would give them away at the convention. And I made a game called You Suck at Making Sandwiches, which is literally just you're describing how your character is going to make a sandwich. And then the other characters use the rules to throw complications at you and things that are going to prevent you from making your sandwich. And whoever makes their sandwich first wins. And I had somebody pick that up, grab that page on Saturday at the convention, and then Sunday at the convention, they come back to my table and say, I took this home and I played this with my family last night, and we had a blast. And I said, oh, that's great. Thank you so much for coming back and telling me. And they said, and I'm the only gamer in my family. And I said, well, because, I mean, it's a simple game. It's just it's a silly idea. It uses 6-sided dice. It doesn't take a long time to play. Like, you'd be amazed what what kind of non-gamer types of people you can get involved in games if you've got the right game that's going to kind of be low impact.
Boom, that's what we call market penetration.
Yeah. I made a whole bunch of new gamers, or at least, I made a party game that that person's family enjoyed.
Nice. So do you play many tabletop games that aren't RPGs?
I play here and there. I've played less over the last few years just because when I am going to get time, if I'm going to get a chance to play, I'm usually looking to play an RPG because I'm trying to play more and sample different systems and games and things. So I don't play board games and card games as much as I used to. But I blame NerdBurger Games for that.
My general rule is, if I'm looking at the game and it's 2 hours plus RPG, if I'm going to tabletop, then it has to be less than that, or I might as well just RPG.
Yeah, when it comes to board and card games, I'm very much I want this to be like 90 minutes tops, including setup.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to spend a half an hour setting up all the pieces and the board and then spend 3.5 hours playing. I don't have the patience for that for board games anymore. To be honest, I like my RPGs to be like 2 or 3 hours nowadays too. I like a 3-hour game where you tell a complete story and it really moves. That's where I'm at.
We had a Heroescape phase that, the problem with it is, you have all the setup for the board that you're going to battle on, and then the picking the army phase. I mean, it's not quite Warhammer. It's not that bad, but yeah, it's still time consuming.
Yep.
So we'd end up. So we just the cheat to that is just having a board that's always set up.
Yeah, just have a table in your rec room dedicated.
Yeah.
Like as soon as you get done with one game, you just we'll just reset everything back to 0, and it'll be ready to go. Put a sheet over it so it doesn't get dusty.
Yeah. There you
And
go.
then you come back to it.
Nah, just get the leaf blower and blow it off.
No.
Now you have ruins and wreckage as well. So we were up on the hour mark. Final words before we head on out.
Thank you so much for having me on the show again. Everybody out there, if you're interested in playing a whole bunch of different indie RPGs, that's what we're going for with NerdBurger Con. It's coming up mid-August. Go to nerdburgergames.com, and there's a page there where you can sign up. If you sign up for the convention early, and it's free, everything is free, you'll get a link to go do event signups later in July, a day before they go public to everybody. So you'll have a better shot at grabbing a game that maybe you have wanted to try, or finding something that you had not heard of before.
Oh, cool. Well, thanks for coming on, Craig. I appreciate it. As always, folks, down in the pinned comment, there is information where you can find NerdBurger Games, follow Craig, on the social medias, and check out NerdBurger Con. And with that, until next time, stay